And now I'm going to introduce Foster Provost, who is also a professor at New York University. He is actually a world-leading expert in artificial intelligence, machine learning, and data analytics. He's the author of a really cool book called Data Science for Business, What You Need to Know About Data Mining and Data Analytic Thinking. So Foster, I'm so excited you're here to introduce our next guest and moderate that session. Thank you.
Oh, great. Thanks a lot, Melissa. You can hear me? All right, cool. Yeah, so I've been excitedly anticipating today's conference. While I'm primarily an innovator professionally, it turns out that one of my first projects in my first full-time industry job after grad school was actually to help the firm get their process in order for building its innovation portfolio. And I've worked with a good number of firms since getting their AI and machine learning innovation portfolios in order, but I'm not a strategy scholar. And so it's great to see both the latest thinking in the academic world and also to hear from hear about what's going on with pros who do innovation portfolio management for a living. Which brings me to welcome Nitish Gupta, who's a global product manager for IPC Systems. Nitish has worked in product management across different industries, including infotech, industrial automation, and health tech. So, for example, prior to joining IPC Systems, he worked with a Buhler Group, London Medical Laboratory, Merck, Tata Group, and he's launched a pretty diverse products such as new optical sorters for grains, food grains and plastics, as well as, the other end of the spectrum, data analytics and digital services across geographies. By training, Nitish is a computer science engineer. He's also an MBA graduate, and he holds a PhD from the University of Cambridge. And particularly relevant for today, Nitish's PhD focus was on portfolio management, and his professional experience has been mainly centered around product portfolio management. And he has experience managing processes from ideation all the way to the launch of innovative processes. So I could probably keep talking, but let me actually pass it on to Nitish, whose talk is Orchestrating the Process of Building Innovation Portfolios. Welcome, Nitish, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Thank you so much, Foster, for a kind introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here. Let me share my screens directly. Thanks again. And what I wanted to do today is I would like to share building portfolios from the practice point of view and sharing what is the process looks like. And if you're looking to improve the portfolio management capability in your firm from process point of view, I hope I will be able to share some pointers and the focus areas to start looking after. So how do we orchestrate and how do we build a portfolio process? But before going into the process, let's first understand relationship between portfolio performance and the firm performance. I think we can all agree that portfolio performance, the type of projects you have in your portfolio, the value of those projects, the different type of projects impact your firm performance. And to put the case here, so we'll just bring Nokia and Motorola. So if you have in mid of 2005, around Nokia has launched N99 communicator with Symbian operating system. We have Motorola Razr with the flip phone, and they were pretty successful, but we know where they stand today. So is it something from the portfolio process point of view or from the portfolio makes that something have gone wrong? Well, let's try to understand that process. But on the other side, it's also Novo Nordisk. It's a Danish firm, and they are one of the biggest leader for the diabetes portfolio. So they have the world leader, and they have a huge range of products in the portfolio. So I just wanted to discuss, okay, from the portfolio standpoint, how firm performance is impacted. Let's try to understand that. So if you're working in portfolio, I'm pretty sure you might have come across some of the challenges which I'm going to share. And for example, poor project selection quality, you're not satisfied how the projects are selected. It seems like there are too many projects in the portfolio, it's overload, missing strategic alignment, transparency. So how many times you actually walk out to the project manager and say, what is the status? Because you don't get that information where the project is. Untimely termination of the project. So there have been, both good and bad. Sometimes you pull off the plug from a very good project early on, and then you suffer, financial losses going down the line. And sometimes it's too late to terminate a project. So when is the right time to terminate a project? What conditions are necessary for terminating a project? Innovation balance. So if you've got too many incremental projects or too many radical projects, then you have a tension between your cash flow and cash generation. Delayed timelines, this is a very common example. And missing portfolio balance. So how about, is my portfolio balanced from the risk perspective? Do we have too many projects in short term and too less projects in long term? So all these challenges exist. And these challenges have been, particularly identified from Project Management Institute surveys, PDMA, Product Development Management Association, and the consulting surveys. And these are very common challenges across the industries in the portfolio. So given that these challenges exist, let's first try to understand why do they exist. Is something we can do about it is the next question, but to really identify the root cause of these challenges. And why these challenges exist is because of the underlying context. We have to understand the portfolio process and the portfolio mix and their context. So I'm just going to some of the factors like environmental dynamism. So when you have too much new products into the market in your market segment, then it's very high tech. So for example, you get a lot of competition, you got too many new product launches, especially in mobile industry, launching every single month from different competitors. So how do you respond? Why it's becoming challenging from the portfolio perspective? Organization structures, how your portfolio is organized, which functions are participating, managerial dispositions, strategy, what is your ideation strategy, how is your organization culture? So if we think about the process, how we want to actually populate, what type of projects goes into the portfolio, all these are impacted. And these factors really impact that process. So if that process is impacted, that means your portfolio mix, what you actually have into the portfolio is impacted. And if it's going in the right direction, you have a good performance from the portfolio point of view. If not, then you have a lower portfolio performance. So the message here is the context, because of the context is so vast, dynamic, the portfolio process is really complex and challenging. It's really difficult that you manage end-to-end portfolio process. And because of these things, and these are realistic, and this is what we face in reality in the practice, that all these factors impact your portfolio process and eventually your portfolio value. Just to put an example, how does it impact? I was working with one of the firm and diagnosing why they're not satisfied with the portfolio value. They say, okay, in next 3 years, they are not going to hit what they want to, from the financial point of view. When I looked for their ideation strategy, it was clear that it was incremental ideation strategy. They were doing only life cycle management projects, which means that if you're doing too many life cycle management projects, the decision criteria, the process you design, the filter you have made for the project selection, project termination, and the decision making, the radical projects which were coming out new to the market, new to the world, new to the company, they are undervalued and they were not selected because of the ideation strategy and the decision criteria which the firm has enacted. So as a result, if you're giving too many incremental projects, that means too many low value projects. You can get some revenue in short term, but you're going to suffer in mid to long term. And there's a risk that your pipeline for the projects, your new product development pipeline is going dry. That means eventually it will indicate the lower portfolio performance. So that is just one example that how these factors interplay and the dynamics between these factors impact your portfolio process and eventually what you have in the portfolio and then performance. So we have seen the challenges, common challenges. We try to understand why these challenges exist. Can we do something about it? And if we can do something about it to address these challenges, then where should we start? So there are two aspects. One is portfolio mix and the portfolio process. And most of the time, and most of the efforts, they are being given to the portfolio mix. What do I have in my portfolio? But the reality is the portfolio process is the other side of the coin, because what you have in your portfolio has gone through a process your portfolio process, and that's why you have that particular portfolio mix. So if you have to think about how do you manage those challenges, that it will be the case that first we have to acknowledge portfolio mix is critical. That's the front face of the portfolio, but how we get to that front face is also very critical. So acknowledging that portfolio process is a critical aspect of the portfolio mix and eventual performance is the very first step. We have to give the importance how we design our portfolio management capability from the process point of view. So now we can see that, okay, there are different ways to address those challenges. What is a process? Now, how does a process look like? If I can share any generic portfolio management process or process of building innovation portfolios. But before I go into sharing the generic portfolio process, I would just like to go back and give some highlight to how that process is derived, and then I will share some of the examples over the period of time. So this process, what I'm going to share in the next couple of slides, has been derived from field work I've been doing as a part of my PhD research. I've been doing consulting with the companies, doing product portfolio management myself with my past experience, theory and observations that I got some opportunities to sit into the boardroom and observe how the portfolio decisions are taken. So it's about 7 years of those experiences, and including 45 high-tech firms across industries, and most of them are Fortune 500. Have been in discussion, workshop engagements, part of the process with 100 portfolio management stakeholders and CIOs, CTOs, chief commercial officers to really understand how portfolio are built in practice. And the portfolios which have been the scope of this 7 years of research and experience have been of $1 billion value from single digit to double digit and across the globe. So I just wanted to highlight that what I'm going to share as underpinning a lot of contribution from around the world and the knowledge sharing. So what is the process? Now, if you ask me that, what is the process of building innovation portfolios, I will just say it's a 3-layer approach. And I will start with the middle layer, which is process itself, portfolio planning. So when you do portfolio planning, so that means that what is your portfolio strategy? How do you say, okay, I want the projects in, for example, AI-based field. I want to develop some digital services based on the data analytics. That's one area where actually say, okay, let's start planning my portfolio. You plan your portfolio, you have some ideas, you put together some ideas forward, then it comes to the stage of portfolio decision making. So you've got the list of ideas, which are at different stage. Some are proof of concept, some are, quite advanced into the stage like Gates system. And you got business cases. So you do an elevator pitch to your senior management, and then there's a decision making happen in those boardrooms, which project to select and which project to go forward, how do we allocate the resources. Then we got the portfolio execution, how the portfolio is executed. So once you get the decision on your project, then it's about the execution. Then you go to the stage gate, you get the resources, and then you actually complete that project. So just 3 simple blocks of the portfolio, the middle layer. And these are, iterative and, the continuously running. One key thing here I should mention that how you define your portfolio process should be in sync with your organizational processes or business processes. So most of the companies, which, in that experience, the portfolio planning happens at the start of their financial year. So it's better that you have, right level of cadence, how other business and organizational processes are being run. So that's the middle layer. Now, we covered the processes, but who participate on those processes? Corporate functions, marketing, sales, legal, engineering, top management, and project management. That was looking, for example, if you have a project management office or dedicated team to look after the project delivery. And the third layer is basically defining who will be the part of steering committee. What is the decision criteria of the projects and how to run that process? That's portfolio governance functions. So this is very a high level overview that if you want to, boil down the ocean and say, this is a generic portfolio process across the industries. Now, if you want to go into the second layer, what entails into each of the key portfolio, for example, ecosystem surveillance in portfolio planning. You go out into the market, your ecosystem, understand from legal point of view, competition point of view, what are the new things coming? What are the business drivers? You develop your portfolio strategy. So once you develop your strategy, you have a list of ideas, the projects, you go for the business case management, and then you make decisions. And then once decisions are made, then it goes to actual execution. So you start developing the product and service, and you have a dedicated processes for that. So this is kind of a capability framework of building portfolios from the process point of view. So what I'm going to do next, I will just tease out a little bit more detail of each of the sub-processes like ecosystem surveillance, strategy development, and try to share at least one example of the case studies or my experience with different firms in each of these sub-processes. So let's start with ecosystem surveillance. What is ecosystem? What it entails. So it entails collecting the ecosystem information, go out, understand who are the partners, government, regulatory. If you are in pharmaceutical, if you are in medical device, that's really a regulatory focused industry. You go out, generate those strategic insight, what's going on, any new product being launched into the market, where are competitors doing, what are they doing? So it's about collecting that information, choosing where you want to collect that information at what level. So you can collect at regional level, local level, and how do you share that information is critical. Assigning, so the very critical thing, and I think one of the pain points when it comes to the process is who is the owner for collecting that information. So some firms have clear marketing department. They are the one eyes and ears of the organization, going into the trade shows, understanding what's being done, and bring that knowledge back to the organization. So ownership is really critical, and it's been a really pain point for some of the firms I came across. Determining budget equally. So when I asked why you didn't have this market information, they said you didn't have any budget allocated. So it's a food for thought that how much budget we are allocating to bring that information. Patterns and themes, when you synthesize those information, the market intel, then it's about how do you present that? Where do you share this information? So what is the benefit of doing and collecting those information, even though you have a budget for this? So all this information, market intelligence and themes, they get synthesized and being consumed further down the process. So one advantage is market-informed roadmap. So when you do the portfolio planning, which I'll share in the next slide, then you need this information. What's going around in the world? What's in your ecosystem? You have a better quality assessment of the project because you can refer back and say, this is my project and this is how I compare my project with competitors, future trends, and where the value lies for those projects and the business cases. And who is actually responsible from the process point of view? It's corporate function. So some firms have marketing and sales responsible, some have joint responsibility with product and sales and product and marketing. So it really depends on how the portfolio process is designed, who is bringing that information and being responsible to share that information. So just a case here, I was working with the R&D portfolio director of a global glass manufacturing firm. And when I discussed with how does your portfolio process starts, what is the key input? In addition to the strategic inputs, it's mentioned that it's the market intelligence. And how do you get that market intelligence? So what he does is every quarter, he go out into the market regionally, locally, and collect some themes, some changes across their product lines, what are the drivers, and some aspect of their product in which the market and market factors they operate, how they are changing. And they bring that knowledge. And what I've seen, what he showed me on his system, that there was a well-defined knowledge structure of saying clear prioritized market factors, the business drivers, that these are the top 3 areas where their portfolio or their business unit should focus on. And that was a very good example of saying, this is my clear direction. Will be used how I develop my portfolio. So that was one part of the portfolio planning. The second part is when you actually do the strategy development. What is your portfolio strategy? Translating strategy, analyzing portfolio, and identifying new projects. So breaking down high-level strategy into portfolio goals. You have, if you're talking about the corporate level strategy, then it translates to the business unit strategy, and then you actually got the portfolio. So these are like 3 simplified layers where you actually do the translation of your strategy to the portfolio goals. What are the gaps in the portfolio? How do you identify the gaps in the portfolio? Most of the firms here use bubble charts to identify and slice and dice their portfolio data and say where their position has changed. Is it with respect to strategy? Does it make sense, or we should be doing something about it? Portfolio KPIs. So if you worked in portfolio, then you will have like financial value of the portfolio. Is my portfolio balance strategically aligned? So you monitor those KPIs as well in that portfolio planning phase. You decide your ideation strategy. So for example, the one I mentioned about the glass, a particular type of glass, he saw in Latin America, there is a trend of new type of glass. Then he came back and said, okay, we should be looking, doing a project in that area, what we can do about it in, different type of glass. So that's the part of the portfolio planning, they identify. What's the benefit? What is the advantage? You get better strategic alignment with the portfolio and what you're going to do next in the decision making. You have clear portfolio directions if you have, have your portfolio goals, depending semi-annually, annually, and the lower risk of dry pipeline. Because if you monitor your KPIs, then balance is one aspect of the KPI, and you want to make sure that you have a healthy pipeline of the ideas for your portfolio. From the stakeholder point of view, who is that doing this? Is corporate functions. You have a very cross-functional top management team, the product team doing this. An example here, I was working with a cleaning equipment firm. This firm is global, and they were developing vacuum cleaners for the industrial purpose and the retail purpose. And I was sitting with the VP of the product portfolio strategy and asked him, can you, describe how portfolio strategy is developed? And what he showed me is on the whiteboard, it was simple that you got this market intelligence, you got all this information, you have a semi-annually meeting with your key stakeholders from manufacturing, sales, product, innovation, and they brainstorm together and decide the current list of the products and some of the product or the areas they want to initiate the new projects, which could be a new product or service. So developing those roadmaps and consuming that information from market intel and then doing cross-functional collaboration already preempt a lot of challenges which we see further down the line, the portfolio process and at the project level. And this decides your ideation strategy as well. So in that portfolio planning, you say, okay, I want to be a market leader and my business unit needs X amount of turnover. Now, if you go down from the portfolio goals, you will look at your current product portfolio and you have the forecast, sales forecast and everything. And then a quick question came that, okay, can we meet those objectives? Can we have this turnover? If the answer is yes, that's a good, good case of the planning. If the answer is no, then where is the gap and what we should do? Should we introduce new projects? Should we think about terminating some projects and accelerate the revenue generation? Or what is the ideation strategy? How do we fix that? So that was the portfolio planning. When it comes to the portfolio planning, when it's done, you have the ideas, you have the project, and it comes to the individual project focus. So business case management, preparing the business casing, assessing those business cases. So assigning a business case. One very good practice, and I think most of the firms were doing is having a business case ownership. So if you have a clear business case owner, that helps in understanding and getting those information out of that ownership model of the business case. So you have got different business cases, you have new business cases, you update your existing business case, and you actually, what you do is you basically assess those business cases. You have the template of the business case, you pull that information, and then you assess where is my business case lying from the portfolio strategy, from the goals perspective, and from the performance perspective. So if I have got the resources today to execute that business case, will I be able to run it with that resource, and can I achieve those objectives in the business? And a lot of research has already been there, which says that if you have a business case management capability, it's linked to the performance of the portfolio. So that has been already an indication that it's very critical aspect of the portfolio decision making. Evidence-based. So when you do a pre-check, so imagine that you have the board meeting, and this was the case with one of the firm I was working in 2019. And there was a board meeting, and you have a pre-board decision-making deck. You send it as a pre-work or pre-read, and that pre-read has a clear inputs from the team cross-functionally that these are the priorities. This is how we prioritize the business cases, and this is the running order of the business from the project perspective. And those inputs were actually really take away all the tactical and all that workload and free up the cognitive ability of the board to think about the sensitivities, to think about the scenarios, rather than just going into individual project details and, getting away from the focus of the strategic alignment of the portfolio. So a business case management is really helpful. Who does that business case? It's, different corporate functions, marketing, sales, together you develop that business case, and project management function if you have that particular unit focusing on the project delivery side. Case here, one of the firm manufacturing pumps. And what they did is, when I started looking into the business case management capability from the portfolio perspective, and what I found a very interesting practice, and I think it's one of the good practice as well, when you develop a business case, you try to focus sales. Next 3 years, next 5 years, that depends on the context. And at what point of time these numbers are being challenged? What is the assumption? So if you say, I'm going to bring an innovative product today, and by 2024, it will have, X amount of turnover for the business. Well, that's good, very good. And you can have engaging discussions around the organization with that information. But when it comes to decision making, they said, okay, what are you assuming? Are you assuming that you can meet the project deadline? The market will react what you are thinking. The competition will react accordingly, given your business case. And if you make those assumptions explicit in the business case, that has a strong implication for your decisions. It becomes more evident for different stakeholders and the portfolio teams who are making decisions that these are the assumptions, and they can actually save a lot of time and focus on mitigating if there is a problem or if there's an issue with those business cases, rather than doing and saying, hibernating those business cases and saying, go back and do more work and come back again. So that really drives the efficiency of the process. The portfolio decision making, where you actually make the portfolio decisions. And what you do is monitor your portfolio performance, decisions, individual portfolio and the projects, and you make the decisions. So what are the conditions to terminate a project? Agreeing on time, commitment and budget, and communicating those results for the project decisions. Of course, clear resource allocation, strategic alignment, and opportunity to really create a higher portfolio value in that base. That's corporate functions and the top management team. Just a case here, medical equipment firm, globally, they make X-ray machines. And when I was part of the portfolio decision-making team, I saw 3 screens, one with the portfolio strategy roadmap, clear what they want to achieve in 5 years. They have a list of the projects and then individual project pitch. And then it was going through that circle, positioning, understanding in the roadmap, saying this is a project we want to go ahead, and this is a project we want to put on hold, partial allocation or terminate. So that was one example which is done with just 3 screens and a very efficient portfolio decision making. So once you get allocated, your decisions are there, you get resources, you got resource allocation plan, and I think that brings on what Professor Ronald might have presented earlier about, resource allocation strategies and regime. You configure your stage gate process, capture those learnings, and if you have got the products into the market, you actually do lifecycle management. So that means you get better learning, less of project delays, you can have stage gate systems and the plan, and this is usually done by corporate functions and the project management function or product management function. So case here, a global consumer electric firm, and what they do is they were figuring out why the projects were getting delayed. And when I jumped into that session and understanding, did the three-month study, I found out they were frequently changing resources and they were not locking in the resources. And the focus was changing from one project to another very instantly. Like, within a week, some projects like exchanging resources. So they lock in the resources for 3 months, better focus. And now they have a clear resource allocation plan for 3 years, next 3 months, for the 6 months, and then about a year. So that's solved the problem of delays. In the interest of time, I will just give final slide here, a deep dive, particular case. So I wanted to share portfolio process of industrial automation firm. And let's talk about the portfolio. What is that portfolio before I go into how it was run? So multi-million turnover annually. There were 20 projects into the portfolio, business unit level. And that business unit having the products into 8 market segments and different type of projects like new technology, technology transfer, life cycle, or innovative or incremental. So as I mentioned, the generic process, 3 key processes: portfolio planning, decision-making, and execution. And the very first was market intelligence. So attending trade shows, they were doing that. They were going globally, locally, regionally, marketing, sales, product people, bringing that knowledge and other bits of the information and developing the product roadmaps. Roadmaps with the product team, senior management. Once you have the product roadmap, what type of products you want to introduce along the time, the features, you develop the business model canvas. I think most of it would be quite familiar with, where the value proposition of the project, senior management and product, they have a look, they analyze those business cases, make portfolio decisions. And once the decisions are made, that goes into execution, and they were using a Kanban board for the project, basically project level management of the portfolio with R&D and cross-functionally. Then we got the product launch into the market. So if you look at the very lower level of the last layer of portfolio planning, decision making, that's how it translated into that business unit portfolio process. And that's being run with different stakeholders in the very first layer, and the key processes. So it's just one example that how you put that generic process framework and see from that lens how it's being executed for one of the business units. Final slide. So when I got into that firm and look at the portfolio decision specifically, and the problem was that all the projects, they were doing very high level comparison. So you got the post-its, you put it in the board, project A, project B, you do some sort of comparison and say, okay, this is project selected and this project is not selected based on the discussion in the room. And the problem with that was there was no formalized criteria for assessing. You might be compare apple versus oranges totally in that portfolio. It was very unstructured and subjective decision-making. And that means it could lead to more of a political behavior as well in the portfolio process. That means the unclear priorities leading to project delay. So when I jumped in, I pitched for that we should have a proper formalized criteria, and which is opportunity versus feasibility, basically. What is the opportunity about those projects and the feasibility? That once I introduce, work with the stakeholders, develop that process model, anchor those statements, how to run that process, then we got objectivity. We have a structure, better functional alignment and satisfaction in the portfolio process, and we have very less project delays further on. So that's one example. If you have to focus over a portfolio capability, that you work on the formalized decision criteria and setting up that process, and that will help in the portfolio planning. So the issues I mentioned before, poor project quality, selection, missing strategic alignment, delayed project timelines. So all these three key challenges were addressed when we introduced this structured formalization criteria for the decision making. Configuration of the tool. So if you're looking for the pointers, the project or the framework which I showed is there are 80 practices underpinning that framework. You got this just categorized into some factors which are critical for portfolio performance, and then you can do self-assessment, basically how these processes and practices are being carried out. So if you're interested in that we can take that offline, and happy to share more information on that. So final slide in say portfolio is complex journey, but it's a continuous journey. And we have to move on understanding the context of the portfolio process and the mix, how they're impacted. And we should also give some focus and attention to the building of a portfolio from the process point of view. That's it from my side.
Thanks a lot, Nitish. We've got a couple minutes left. So when I guess my experience has been, and it's specifically, I especially lately, I've been working with AI and machine learning projects, but I don't think this is this observation is unique there. But even if it were, it might be broadly interesting, right? The hardest part is actually estimating the likelihood of success, right? So you can put a business case conditioned on success together, right? Yeah. But my feeling is unless the firm actually has some super experienced like AI professional who's delivered a lot of different AI solutions, firms have a very, very difficult time. And this is essentially estimating the science uncertainty and the science risk, right? And so do you have advice for what firms ought to do in those situations? Because it's if they can't estimate that, the whole portfolio process, in my experience, is basically just kind of like, you just pick some stuff then.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think there have been few cases which I also might experience myself, that how do you prove the value of AI-based solution? How do you put the numbers behind you can sell this solution and the likelihood of success? And it's challenging. So one approach which I have seen is, more of a lean innovation, that you do more of experiment-based, refined, minimal viable product sort of method. You go out, test in the market and come back. But that means the process which I've shown, this needs to be configured for that particular type of project. And for example, digital projects and analytics. And it has to be run with a different mindset, because when the mindset comes, when you see a business case on the portfolio decision-making in the meeting, that you expect everything in that assumptions, numbers, evidence, but that's not possible for these. So it's better to run from the minimal viable approach for these.
Right, and to be, I want to be clear. I'm not actually talking about the product uncertainty here. I'm just talking about whether the thing can fundamentally even be done, in the first place, which that's not clear for a lot of proposals, for AI product.
So that would, I would say there is a different portfolio process for that, which like a front end when you are developing the technology, not even going into the productization of that. So that's more of a technological front end. And that leads to the technology and product innovation funnel. How do you actually feed in from your technological advances and the features and say, okay, this is a stage for productization. And that completely goes into, for example, TRL level. So, if you go into fundamental technology development, then it goes to TRL 1 to 7, and then it's being, going into productization phase. So what I'm trying to say is it's completely different process, but it's still a portfolio process, because you have to say the set of technologies you're working on or technological ideas and the set of the product portfolio, they need to talk to each other. Because if you can't see a commercial value at some point of time in that development, then what is the use of doing that? Better to realign and refocus your resources some other areas.
Okay, time's up. So let me again thank you, Nitish. I look forward to maybe talking to you some more about this